Welcome, everybody, back to the podcast. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
Really
good. Everybody having a good week so far?
I am.
Yeah.
I just noticed that I'm the standout here, and y'all both have Diet Dr. Pepper, and I have a cup of something.
Diet Dr. Pepper with cream soda.
Yeah,
soda.
this is delicious.
My new
I will
favorite
say.
drink, by the
I've
way.
noticed it's going very quickly from the church fridge.
Yes,
So
that one always goes first. I like it a lot, but I prefer
really good.
Mountain Dew Zero.
that's also really good.
So this is not either of those. This
Smells
is just
like coffee.
This is coffee.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Steve Clark has made some hazelnut coffee in the office, which always makes me drink more because it smells lovely.
It
Yes,
does smell
does.
good. It does smell good.
All right.
Enjoy
So
it.
we all have our beverages. We're all ready to go.
I'm sorry for bringing that up.
That's okay.
No,
That's
that's good.
okay. So here we are. We are week 2 of in-person services. I think we did okay.
I think so.
I think it went well.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting their tickets.
Sorry, I was distracted. Somebody just walked down the hallway, turned to realize we were
They're
filming,
like,
and turned
"Oh, we're
around.
filming."
I was
They're going,
completely
no.
baffled by it, but that's all right. Sorry. Yes, week 2 of
Week 2
in-person
of
services.
in-person.
I think they also went well. People are doing great at getting
Yes, they are. Thank you
tickets.
guys for doing that.
I've had somebody say hoops and jumping through hoops, and I'm thinking
Jumping through
There-
hoops.
it should not be plural.
That's right.
Hey, hoop, get your ticket.
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, yeah. No, it's and everyone had a ticket who came and had
Yes,
their
they did.
tickets, and was very smooth process, very easy process. I thought we had more people with the QR code, so maybe we had some good podcast listeners out there who
knows?
who
what
heeded
they're
our
supposed to do.
words. Yeah,
Right.
but yeah. So having your QR code's important coming in, and so anyway, people seem to enjoy it. From everything I heard, people seem to leave with a good time and
Yeah, I think
Got plenty of room.
plenty
plenty
of
of
room.
room.
Spacing
So,
them
yeah.
out. Everything's going
Everybody,
well.
if you're wondering what it's like, you could go and watch last Friday's video, which is on the YouTube channel. And I
Yes.
gave little pictures of the
Cool.
auditorium
Cool.
in there that you could look at in the children's area. You can see what that looks like. But yeah, we are socially distanced.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Plenty of distance.
Imagine a room built for 500 that has 80 people in it.
You
That
know
may
where,
not be a good picture.
you know where we're not socially distanced? On our subscribers,
That's
we're almost to 1,000.
Yeah,
I was
see,
going to
them all
bring that
clumped
up. I
together.
was going to bring that up.
I saw it on your
people.
little
It
sheet,
was
so
on my
I was giving you a good old segue.
six
right.
people. We need
We need
six more.
6 more subscribers to get to 1,000.
They don't have to actually want to
Yeah.
listen to us.
Call
They
up
just
your
have to-
friends.
and
No.
say, "Would you subscribe?"
Call your neighborhood homeowners association. Get
Yeah.
anybody you can to subscribe to our channel
Yep.
And this time next week, we'll be able to report 1,000.
about Super Chat.
$9.98 by next week.
We shall see. Okay. All right. Well, today we are going to tackle at least 1 or 2 questions, and these come from some of the most Googled questions about God.
Okay,
All right. I
great.
thought
Go.
somebody must have these questions.
Someone does.
So, or they wouldn't be the most Googled. So
Googled.
we are going to tackle them right now on this podcast. So, here's the first question that I found, one of the most popular. Does God truly love everyone? And if he does, why? Which I thought was a fascinating question to
Sure.
be one of the top ones, because the first thing I thought was, if someone asks that, then they must have evidence, or at least think there's evidence that it's not true.
Okay.
Because if they said, really, does God love everyone? And I thought that was very sad. Because I
Sure.
thought if someone's having to go to Google to find that out, there must be some thought in their brain that maybe that's not true.
Or they think it might be true and they don't like it.
Maybe.
Maybe true.
There are
That's true.
people that
hadn't
there
thought
are
about that,
people
but
there
you're
are
right.
people that they have heard God loves everybody and they're like,
But
No
what
one to-
about?
I don't know how he likes them.
Yeah.
Wow.
True.
Hadn't thought about it from that angle, but
Well, I hadn't thought about it from your viewpoint. And I'll say a thought that I had while you were talking about that it's going to be really hard, I think, for everybody to get this if you haven't studied a lot of ancient history or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact that anybody asked that question shows how deeply our culture is influenced by Jesus, even
Right.
if you don't know it's influenced by
True.
Jesus, because there aren't other gods that taught by anybody else that anybody ever thought before Jesus that God loved everybody.
that's
Right.
true. Yeah.
Everybody else, there was a tribal God or there was a God that was over a land or a people or a God who did, if you did the right, I mean, in most cultures, God's played with people and they toyed with people. They didn't love people.
Right.
They used people.
Right.
Yes.
And certainly not everyone. Not
No,
all.
not everybody.
Not every person from
Only the
anywhere.
good people, only the best people,
Right.
only the
Yeah.
people that would.
And only their people in
Yeah.
their tribe and their country or their whatever. And so, yeah. So the answer to that is yes, God loves everyone.
Yes.
Absolutely.
As followers of Jesus,
Yes.
we definitely believe that, and He's our
Yeah.
example of that because there aren't any people that Jesus didn't demonstrate His love for, and then we're.
And he would even go
explicitly
further.
tells-
I mean,
go
he
ahead.
went even further to say that the people, because like you said, the tribal gods, and there were certain people that God was happy with and loved, and others that didn't. And then Jesus not only expanded that, he went further. He says the people that are your enemies that you would naturally hate. Now that extends to them as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
And he used that then as an example. If you want to be like God, he
Right.
said for those in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, the evidence that you're like God is not even that you love people who are like you,
Yeah.
or love people that love you back, or love people that you have a little problem with, but you're going to make up with them some point. He said, when you can love an enemy,
Yeah.
he said, then you're being like your Father in heaven because he makes the rain to shine. I mean, the rain to fall on the just and the unjust, which when you're trying to raise crops is really important.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
most of the gods at that time were some kind of fertility god that was designed for
Yes.
that he would send rain, he would send that. And so the fact that God was a God who blessed everybody, so being that his loving nature.
And so their answer to their question, why, is because at his core, that's who God is.
And that's what John revealed to us.
Yeah.
God is love. And that's the first time that had ever been spoken as well.
Right.
That not only does not that God just does love people,
Right.
he is in his nature, that is who he is.
Well, and it is his central characteristic, and so every other characteristic we know about God, God's power, God's justice, God's whatever holiness, it is all an attribute of his loving nature.
Right.
It is
That's
it
right.
is it is consumed by. Those aren't things that he has to balance.
Yeah.
He is not balancing his justice and his holiness with his love. They are consumed by his love.
Yeah, people often get confused and think, God, it says God gets angry, but God's loving. Well, if you love something, anything that does danger causes problems for the thing you love,
Yeah.
it makes you angry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I love my children. Anything that would cause damage to them, I would not be happy about.
Which is why when Jesus came on the scene and said, you love God not by just loving God, you love God by loving people.
Right.
And I've always, used that analogy of, what you do to my children
Right.
reflects directly on what you think about me. And that's always been the case.
That's
and
right.
it's the way God sees it. So we love God by loving the ones next to us. That's how we show it. So
I think that answers that question.
I think it
God
does.
loves everyone because God is love.
there you go. Second question that is one of the most popular that I pulled is this. Does God test us? And I would imagine this comes from someone feeling as if, and this is the way I've heard it from most people, is something happens in my life, typically something bad or something very hard, difficult that I'm going through, and then I hear people refer to it as, well, God must be testing me.
Sure.
And so I think the motivation behind this question is, do things that happen bad or hard in my life, is that God's active? Is God being active in my life to try and put me to the test so that I can prove something to him or something of that nature?
I think what's interesting about this question is, and we've actually answered this somewhat in other places, other questions on the podcast, but today, my discipleship group, discipleship plug for the week, we are on James 1. That was the chapter we read today, and that one begins by James saying, hey, when trials and when tribulations, these bad things in your life start coming about, you should take joy. And then he gets to this bottom, if you get to the end of the chapter, he gets to this place. He says, but when you're going through the trial, don't be tempted to think God is testing you or tempting you. He says, God's the one that's giving you all the good things in your life. He gives good gifts. And it says that God himself is not tempted by evil. And so he's not going to tempt us with this kind of thing, or test us with this. So the answer, as far as in the way that you're bringing it up, that absolutely, God does not test us. He is, the bad things in your life are not God going, let me see what happens here.
It really does have a lot to do with how you define that phrase of what does it mean to be. Because I could also say, well, in a sense, yes, because there are things that come into my life that test my faith or my resolve or my ability to love others, and it gives me an opportunity to almost like flex that muscle, which then grows me to become stronger in that.
Sure.
So in that sense, I could say, yeah, it is a test for me to come through it, and then on the other side be stronger or better, or to see some good come out of it, which we know God does, works good out of evil things.
Well, and that's why James says you should take joy in your trials, because it
Exactly.
produces perseverance, it produces character, it produces, but that's not necessarily God doing the testing.
Yes.
It's God working in this
There you
thing
go.
that is testing your faith to bring about something. I've noticed you've pulled up the YouVersion app, so you have something to share.
Well, I always think it's interesting, and I know I'm a contrarian. Everybody always reminds me I'm a contrarian by nature, and I am. I think you all have done the perfect part of getting on the God. Does God actively do it? And I think everything in life is a test, and we don't realize it.
Sure.
And the interesting part to me is inevitably everybody wants, when something I didn't want to have happen, I think God is bringing bad things to test me. But I think, and I've used this as a prayer of mine for some time, the wisdom of Solomon in Proverbs. Solomon says, he has this prayer, and he asks God, he says, don't give me poverty nor riches, but only what I need for today. This is Proverbs 30, by the way, if you want to look this up later. He says, otherwise, if I get too much, I might just get proud and disown you, God, and think, it's all me. Who is the Lord? Or if I don't have enough, I might be poor and still, and then dishonor the Lord. It's interesting that in a country like ours, and I would say for the majority of people in our particular area, we are I don't know that people that live here probably can't see it. We're a wealthy county.
Sure.
We have a high standard of living as a median income. And I think people don't see, your riches are a test.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure.
And you're more concerned about the hard things that come to you, and is God testing me with a hard thing? The truth is, you are being tested every day by the good things that come to you, and more people are failing the prosperity test than are failing the hardship test.
Yeah.
Most people in the hardship test turn to God. Most people in the prosperity test turn to themselves and go, dude, I am good. Look how smart I am. Look how wise I am. Look how hard I work. Look how much my family has done. Look at me. But when we have a hardship, we tend to turn to God. But that question, and I'm not saying because that's a Googled question, and so Google can't explain to me. Most people think, I'm having a hard time.
Yes.
Sure.
Am I being tested? Everything is testing you.
True.
Well, and I think
Everything is
in those
testing.
situations, a good way of thinking even of the word test, because we often think of it in different ways, but it is testing in the sense of revealing what's there.
Oh, yeah.
That and I think it's actually Jim Carrey who said it, but that he wishes everyone became rich and famous so they could see that wasn't the answer, that fame and that it just makes you more of what you already are. Blessings often just makes you more. So the good thing is, as followers of Jesus, if what's on the inside of us is generosity and love and compassion, then when I have these blessings, as you talk about, I now have more opportunity to do good things with those than I don't. And if those opportunities get taken away in the sense that I don't have as much, I still have something else to rely on and to pull from. And that the testing is actually just revealing it's like putting, gold into a test, right? Into the fire.
Yeah, I've always said to people when they're starting out, it is way better to learn to give when you don't have anything.
Oh, yeah.
Because you think you don't have enough to give, but it is way easier when you make $1,000 a month to give 10% of that than when you make $100,000.
Sure.
Because then you go, now how are they really going to make use of my money? Is that being, I worked so hard for this, whereas you're just so thankful that you make it by that you go, somebody else might need this, which is why poor people always give a higher percentage of
percentage.
their income
Sure.
than people who have more. Always.
Sure.
Okay, good stuff. All right, on to Sunday.
Yeah.
Talk about Sunday.
So Sunday, Jason taught, and we talked about the passage from Paul in 2 Corinthians, where he talks about this thorn in his flesh and this problem that's in his life, and he prayed multiple times to have God remove it. And every time he gets the response, "My grace is all sufficient," or "is all you need." And really what you were tackling was this idea of we've all had, or at some point will have, times in our life where there's something I want God to fix, or there's something I want God to take away. And what do I do when God says no? And what I thought was interesting, and this is where I kind of wanted to begin our discussion about it on Sunday, is the phrase you kind of brought out of our greatest weakness is God's greatest opportunity to show himself strong in us. So any kind of discussion to start there, where have you seen that true in your life or in someone else's life, or what about that is helpful to us in every moment, not just in my moments of weakness?
It's been true my entire. I mean, you want to just talk about my entire career in ministry, and here's the way it normally plays out. If people think that I've got something figured out, whether I do or not, if they just think that I'm better at something spiritually or anything, I'm not very approachable. I'm not. It's just hard to relate. But if you say those really important words, "me too," I struggle with that, or I'm weak in that area. Well, now there's a connection between me and somebody else, and I'm able most of the time to help people along. The other thing that I would say to that is, when I am strong in something and I make it pretty well known that I'm strong in something, then there's no reason to honor God in that moment. Because, oh, well, that's you. That's all you. But when I'm weak in something and I'm making it through, or I'm achieving something, or I'm moving through something, like I said in the message, God does something in your life where people look at that and say, "I don't know how they do that. That must be God." Well, then we're putting the spotlight on where it belongs. We're shining light on Him. People are seeing Him. He's getting the honor and the glory for that, which is the whole point in the whole deal anyway.
Yeah.
That's the way I've experienced it myself.
That's great.
Yeah, that's true for me too. Every good thing that has ever happened, that God has ever done through me, has been through something that if I had been given the choice, I would not have allowed to happen to me. That I wish I could have covered up, or I wouldn't have to talk to anybody about, or I wouldn't have to reveal. I'm not very good at that.
Yeah.
All the places where God has greatly used me have been in those areas where I have to admit, this is a weakness for me. Yeah. This is not a strength for me.
Yeah.
Well, and isn't it true? And I know you hit on this kind of briefly, and I think for many people it's easy to kind of brush it off of every day I'm dependent on God, or I should be. I should live my life in total dependence on God.
Or I should be aware of it.
Yeah, and I think we brush it off so easy. Oh, yeah, that's right. But that is sometimes those things where someone gets through the midst of something horrible and they say, like, oh, that's the best thing that could happen to me. And often it's because maybe similar to what we were talking about of testing, it revealed in me this weakness, this dependence on God I didn't know, I wasn't aware that I had. But if I can get myself, and that really is the basic of discipleship with Jesus, is me learning nothing I do is in my own power.
Right.
Anything, I mean, Jesus very openly, before he goes to the cross, having his meal with his followers, and he says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. And he says, apart from me, you can do nothing. And so often we look through that and we just go past it. But when Jesus says you can do nothing, I think he means nothing.
Yeah, he
nothing
does.
of value, nothing
wouldn't
that's
have
ever
said it
going to
if he didn't
matter.
mean it.
Nothing's going to matter in your life. And we so often, I'm looking for the things that I can do. And when people say things like, faith is just a crutch. People kind of go, oh, it's not a crutch. I'm a strong person. I can do this. And what I want to say is, it's not really a crutch. It's more like a wheelchair. It's me realizing I couldn't walk without this.
Yeah.
And I don't have to. And this is your Enneagram mention for the week. But that really is the beauty of, for me at least, as the more I've read about it, that you see when you see in the Enneagram, there's this one part where they talk about everything in your life that you have excelled at and has made you go is actually not a strength. It is actually your weakness, and you have used it to cope in life. So for me, my ability, my chief coping mechanism as a 3 is efficiency. I can get things done well and quickly, and I have an ability to mass produce things. I can get tons of work done at once, and I have always seen that's my chief strength. That's what people like. And what they get to is that's actually your greatest weakness.
Yeah.
Because it actually hinders you in other things. And when you get to a point where you say, I'm going to surrender this to God, and that means I won't be as efficient as I used to be, and I won't be able to stay at the office as long as I used to, and I'm going to have to get rid of this. That's actually when you become dependent on God to say, well, God, this is the only way I've ever felt worth. This is the only way I've ever felt like I could get my way through. So you're saying now I've got to rely totally on you? Mm-hmm. I think that's the moment where in anything, when you talk about God, my greatest weakness is God's greatest opportunity. That's really where he wants to meet. He doesn't want to meet me in the moment where I'm like, look, I stayed at work an extra 5 hours every day, and look at all the stuff and it's easy for us who work in ministry saying, I did it for God. Mm-hmm. I did it for you. But there's a level of it that I needed to feel important.
I remember, you just remind me of something. I think I was even teaching this very same passage in another message years ago. And in the midst of preparing that talk, I felt, I believe it was God, lead me to do something in the message that I wasn't comfortable doing. I'd never done this before, but someone had challenged me. I think it may have been you, Ed, challenged me to be more transparent in my speaking. And so I did this thing where, I don't know if you remember, if you were around, I brought this bag on stage full of rocks.
Oh yeah,
I remember that.
And I didn't address it until the end of the message. And then at the end of the message, I basically pulled out each rock and made each rock represent an area of my life. And I talked about, here's where I don't do well in this area. And because the truth is, we have weaknesses in every area of life. And I talked about, here's my weakness with spirituality and my relationship with God. Here's my weakness as a parent. Here's my weakness as a husband and what I don't tend to do well. And I just laid them all out there, laid the rocks out on the stage. And it was not fun. It was very emotional for me. I almost didn't do it. And I probably have had more people talk to me about that message than anything I've preached in 25 years. And it's because what Paul said is true. My weakness is his opportunity to be seen for who he is as being a strong God. Because the truth, like I said on Sunday, is that without God, we can't do anything. Mm-hmm. We are dependent on him in every moment, all the time. We just don't recognize it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, and I'm talking about that a little bit Sunday in this series, is that I don't think it's that God can't meet us in our strengths. I think God, obviously he's the one that gave us the talents, the abilities, those kind of things. I think it's because those things, he shines through those things naturally, and it's easy for us that you have a certain talent, that you can begin to think it's you. Now, you didn't do anything to get it. Mm-hmm. Everybody that ever has anything that is a true gift, and it's a gift, you didn't have to work as hard. You watch other people work hard to do it, and that's not as hard for me as it is for them. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you didn't work. I'm just saying you didn't have to work as hard as they do. Yeah. You begin to think, oh, I'm special. It's not that God can't meet us there. It's that we aren't open to meeting God there. Yeah. I like the feeling I have that it's about me. Mm-hmm. I like the way that I feel that this somehow reflects on me. Mm-hmm. It's only in the weekend. Like we were just talking about prosperity and riches a minute ago. There is a part of us that wants to, it's the original sin. I want to be like God. Mm-hmm. I want the glory to come to me. I like that.
Well, and I think that in particular makes it the weakness. That the moment that Because life, and that's what I think I was trying to get to. And once again, this is, I think, a Dallas Willard quote. So there's that one but that grace is the jet fuel that powers. But the only way grace comes is by me saying I'm incapable. Because grace is God working in my life to do what I cannot do. So as long as I continue to believe that I'm bringing 10% to the table or 1% it's when I get to the point where I go, I'm bringing nothing to the table. I'm bringing nothing to the table and anything good. And I think we've talked about this all, I know, separately of there are those messages or those sermons you write and you feel like, I knocked this one out of the park. And then you deliver it and nothing happens. And
you
you're
can
like,
tell nobody got anything. And when you're delivering it, you're like, yeah, that wasn't good.
Yeah.
And then you get up with something you felt like, this is not great. And you may not have prepared as well as you should have. But then people come up and you can tell it really affected. And I think it's those moments where I get to the place where I realize, like you said, it's not something special about me. It's God working in me. And that's daily in my parenting and in my marriage. And even the things I think I'm good at, if I get to a place where I say, it doesn't even matter if I'm good at it, what I want to see accomplished and what God wants to see accomplished is Him partnering with me. That everything good comes from God partnering with me. And I think that's where, as you said, when I get to a place where I say, I'm weak, but He's strong, it's not a faux modesty of I have to walk around going, oh, I'm so weak. And even things other people would look at me and say to me, Nathan, you're really, really good at that. And I could see for someone who doesn't believe in God that it might be, they would say that's just natural talent. But what I know is it's God working in me to do the things that matter.
Right.
Yep.
And it's me having that awareness that changes everything. And I think that's where we get to the place of Paul where he says, I boast about my weaknesses.
Yeah.
In every situation. But then you had this other part, and I want to talk. Did anyone have anything else to add on that?
No,
I'm
I'm good.
I'm good.
No.
So then you had this quote that every time, and I've heard you use it before too, and every time people have this kind of chuckle about it, the Philip Yancey quote of, the only thing worse than disappointment with God is disappointment without God. I think there's a basic truth to that, but I want us to talk a little bit about that too. Once again, how have you seen that true maybe in your own life, but also, you brought it up of people you've known and that you've had experiences with where they do just get so disappointed or so fed up that they eventually get to a place where they say, I'm done with this. And anyway, I don't want to re-preach the whole thing, but you know what I mean. So anything in that you feel like, I think there's probably stuff we can revisit in that where you've seen the truth of that statement.
You got any thoughts on that?
Well, the thought I always have, and I was thinking about this earlier today in, again, preparing to teach, because I've got some teaching coming up, and I think about people that I have known that inevitably when I can be disappointed with what God decides not to do, and as long as I'm still interacting with God, we can handle it.
Yeah.
But inevitably, I have known, and I bet everybody who's joining in, maybe not everybody, but most of us have known somebody that they go, no, that's it. I'm done. I don't, God was supposed to this, God was supposed to that, and I believed that God would this and God would that, and then it didn't happen, and I'm just so disappointed. I've just given up on the whole idea of God.
Right.
I certainly have several people I can think of that way.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, and if I talk to them about it, it's really at the heart of this series. And if I had to say what I wanted people to get out when we started teaching this, and what I'm hoping people will get through this at the end of it, it'd be this idea. It really doesn't matter who you think God is. It is who God is that matters.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm disappointed with God, what is happening is there is a part of a scale that falls off of my eyes of something I thought was true about God. He never told me it was true.
That's
There
right.
might have been a human that told me who was standing, speaking for God, and they were just wrong.
Yeah.
It might be the way I read a scripture and something in my life made me want to believe that that was the way that it should be. And again, I think there's been a lot of teaching in my lifetime, the amount of teaching that I have heard that faith is a power.
Right.
Faith is a power. And that if you can believe it, you can achieve it. If, whatever you can say, you can have. And we almost believe that I can put God in a box. Or I remember, and I'm going to talk about this Sunday, you get a little God and you just carry him around in your pocket. And anytime you need to whip it out, you just whip it out. And I play the God card, man. I got faith. Mm-hmm. Eventually, that does not work.
No.
It doesn't work for anybody. Mm-hmm. And if that's what you thought, you could carry the God of the universe in your pocket and whip it out anytime you wanted to make it work, no wonder eventually that disappoints you.
Right.
But that's not who he said he was. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a kid that thought, hey, my mom and dad promised me I'd get whatever I wanted for Christmas. Mm-hmm. It's probably not what they said.
Right.
But I get that you as a kid thought that's what you hoped that they would say. Mm-hmm. But they aren't wrong for you thinking that.
Yeah. And I think I heard Andy Stanley say this one time. That most of us who get disappointed and walk away from God, we're not often walking away from God. We're walking away from a God that we thought existed.
That's right.
And when we found out that God didn't exist, well, then I don't want. It's like I said on Sunday. I don't want that kind of God.
Right.
And so I go somewhere else. But what like you said, what we're discovering is we're getting closer and closer to the heart of who He really is.
Yes.
And sometimes that is a little disappointing.
Well, and for the truth is that this is hard for everybody in our society, and for people that would say they're followers of Jesus. If there is only one God, and He revealed Himself in Jesus, then any other concept you have about God is a false God.
Yes.
It's no different than any other God that's ever been made up and thought about. And when that God dies, He was never real anyway, and it's okay.
That's right.
And so everybody who believes in the God of Jesus is an atheist about every other God that ever existed. I am an atheist about every God except the God of Jesus.
Yes.
I do not believe in any God but the God of Jesus. Mm-hmm. So on most gods, I'm atheistic.
There you go. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who are still in that viewpoint, they just haven't gone through all the possible gods to get to the one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it is. I've had conversations with people, and mostly younger people on this, where they'll say something like, I'll say something about God or what God wants them to do, and they'll just go, that just doesn't feel like Jesus to me. And I said, well, that's a good line of questioning to go down, because you should always balance everything through who is Jesus. The bigger problem, though, is you don't know who Jesus is.
Yes.
And you think you know who Jesus is. And so you've created a version of Jesus in yourself that is only love your enemies, but has not defined what love actually looks like, which sometimes includes having to tell people the truth you don't want to hear, or that they don't want to hear, and that kind of thing. Where if you get to if love, because that's what everyone always says is, and I'm sure we have this, we say love everyone always, right? That's what Jesus teaches us. And I have never had anyone ever go, nope, disagree with that. But if we had an honest conversation about it, I'd get nearly everybody to go, I don't agree with that.
I've had people in our church that when it comes down to it, there's somebody in their small group that they've gotten crosswise with, or their discipleship group, and they're wearing the T-shirt that says love everyone always. And when I say, well, this is where you practice what your T-shirt says. Well, but I don't love them. I know. So now you have to treat them like an enemy, and you still have to love them, because I ain't asking you to feel anything about them.
Right.
I'm asking you to do the proper behavior toward them. That's what Jesus would have us do. Yeah. Well, that's not what they thought the T-shirt meant.
Right. Or what they thought following Jesus meant. And I think that gets to an even bigger thing, and maybe this gets to the disappointment part of it, is I do think, and we've tackled this before, our view of Jesus came to get me to heaven is so dangerous for people who just think that's all Jesus came to do. He just came to bring me to heaven. Also, because we don't know we're not all talking about the same heaven, because what most people think, the part they focus on heaven, is this idea of a pleasure factory where everything I've ever wanted to do or ever have happen in my life is going to happen in heaven. And so their idea, when someone says, hey, Jesus came and you can have access to the kingdom of heaven now, they go, well, then that means whatever I wanted to have happen, my life should only be pleasure and all this kind of stuff. It's so damaging when what Jesus came to bring is us being able to cooperate with God fully. Like He came for us to have a relationship where we could cooperate with God in every moment. Well, that doesn't sound like an intense pleasure factory all the time. And so I might hear that and go, well, then that's not what I signed up for.
Yeah,
and it may not.
when Jesus said, "I came to give you life abundant," we have a whole other definition
Yes.
of what abundant life looks like.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, and this may get us too far off track, but I'm a fan of the show The Good Place, though I would not. I wouldn't uphold all of its value.
course
So if
not.
you haven't watched The Good Place, it's about heaven.
Right. Yeah.
And the part I love about it is how the show winds up ending, so I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But it plays out, in my opinion, that natural conclusion of if heaven is a pleasure factory, the end of that story is where that eventually leads.
Right.
Which is everybody goes, this is not what
Yeah.
I would rather be annihilated.
right. Right.
Yeah, and you probably would.
Because
If
again,
everybody was getting what they wanted.
It's the old Far Side cartoon that it's the guy who's sitting on the cloud and they've been there for 10,000 years now, and he's just sitting on a cloud and he goes, wish I'd brought a magazine.
Yeah.
Because that gets pretty boring if,
Yep.
if that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is heaven's not about us.
Right.
Right.
Heaven's about God.
Exactly.
And and again, I don't want to get off into another topic, but that's why for a lot of people say, why would God not let everyone go to heaven? Well, because not everyone wants God.
Yes.
You know, you got to have your want changed, or else heaven's going to be miserable for you.
Well, and that is
That's Dallas's old answer. Dallas Willard again. His answer was, God's going to let everyone in heaven who can possibly stand it.
Yes.
yeah.
I love that.
Well, and that ultimately is what life is, and the discipleship process. It is training. It is training me to become the kind of person who enjoys the presence of God and wants to be in the presence of God. And that, so to get back to your the original quote from Philip Yancey of disappointment with or without God, most often we think disappointment of any kind, that God would never allow anything to happen to disappoint me because he's trying to get me to heaven. Why wouldn't he just take me now? Because I'll never feel any kind of disappointment. Well, maybe the reason I'll never feel disappointment in heaven is because I have changed.
Yes.
Right? And that maybe there are things that happen in this life, and that the disappointment that happens within me, like you said, if I stick it out with God, God eventually will get me to the other side of, hey, I have better in mind for you. I have other things that we're moving forward with this. But when we have the wrong narrative in our head of the point of life and the point of following Jesus, it does eventually lead to the thing you talked about of that God's a little God in my pocket, and he's here to serve me and to figure out what I want in life, because in the end, I'm going to my personal paradise. Jesus did say you will be in paradise, but he didn't say it was your personal paradise or whatever that looks like. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
get why some people hold so hard onto this life. They've had it pretty good in this life.
Sure.
And they can't imagine anything better. Well, that's the problem. They can't imagine anything better. Maybe
Well,
you
that's
need,
my problem.
Maybe you need to work
That's
on
all
your
of our problems.
imagination.
That's all of our problems. I
Yeah.
mean, so.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I had for.
All right, man.
I thought it was great.
All right. Ed, you are going to wrap us up today.
All right, I have.
What do you have
Let
for
me get
us?
it back on my phone here because I looked up a scripture there, which was really more important than what I'm going to do here. But we'll get to
Absolutely.
it. I'm going to ask you guys questions.
Okay.
And I have one in my mind, so I'm just going to go ahead and we'll start with this one instead of letting y'all pick.
All right.
All right.
And while I get
Go
the
ahead.
rest of them back up. If you were to tell somebody your absolute favorite candy in the world, because I'm trying to get y'all some candy, like somebody watching might bring you candy.
Okay.
What is your favorite candy of all time?
You got to be selective on this.
I know if I'm getting them.
I know. I can't promise you anybody. So
No,
they may
of
not.
course
They
not.
may not care about it.
Okay. I can narrow it down to a couple. Because I'm thinking in my mind, I've been missing the movie theater. I have a feeling movie theaters aren't coming back. I know to hurt everyone's feelings.
that's
I
a
mean,
long shot.
when I say everyone's feelings, since no one was really going to the movie theaters
right.
except for
Well,
me.
you know who it does hurt? People who went to Ashley Park.
Oh
Our
yeah,
Ashley
well,
Park
I don't want to
campus.
go down that rabbit hole.
I
I
feel-
didn't mean that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I meant my personal experience of
Movie
going to
theaters.
the movie might not be
Yeah.
exactly the same, and so my movie theater candies were Milk Duds. I'm a big Milk Dud guy. Twizzlers. I know most people ain't about Twizzlers, but I like Twizzlers, and some kind of like Sour Patch Kids, something like that. So any
So
of
you
those.
didn't have one.
No,
Okay.
any of those though. If you're bringing me some,
All right.
that's
Yeah.
what I want.
I'm not as much of a candy guy as I am I like desserts, but I tend to like anything with caramel in it. That's like my go-to thing. Almost anything.
Which
that
Milk
has,
Duds fits that.
It does, but I shouldn't have said that.
Well,
That's
it's
not my-
pure caramel, so it gets stuck in your teeth. I get
Yeah.
that.
I
That's
love
what,
caramel,
that-
too.
That's
I
hard
love
for a
it.
lot of
I
people.
just love it.
I love the
So like
pure-
Snickers.
Honestly, Milky Way with the just the they have
caramel,
one that's
Simply
called
Caramel?
the Simply Caramel Milky
good
Way.
one.
That's like my that's
Have
my
you had the
candy
caramel
bar.
M&Ms?
I like
There's
them.
M&Ms
Yeah,
that
I
have
like
caramel in them.
They're okay.
Okay, I like
They're
them.
okay.
I like them.
I love caramel too. In fact, one of the things when I was growing up on Halloween that some people would give out would be, they'd just make those bags of caramel, and you'd go to some people, and then maybe this changed. Some people would make caramel apples, but then you buy the bags of caramel that are just the little cubes of caramel, and some people give
yeah.
you 8 or 10 of those.
I used to eat those like
love
crazy
those things.
when I was a
And
kid.
occasionally, they would have a chocolate one in there too, and it would be great too. So
Sweet.
I love those as well.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right, what's the best comedy movie you've ever seen?
Oh man.
I'm not a big comedy movie guy, so I'm just going to admit that up front.
I'm not anymore. I was when I was younger.
I don't know because comedy. I'll just say this too: comedy doesn't age well. So things that were
That's
funny
true.
in the '80s, and I don't even just mean like
Yeah.
political correctness. I just mean timing doesn't work the same. The kind of humor doesn't change. So people will regularly come to me and be like, "Oh, have you seen this Steve Martin movie?" And I
Yeah.
have. Like it doesn't work as well.
Well, I'll tell you a movie that you and I saw when you were young. It was you and I were on a trip to Arizona.
Yeah.
You went with me to a trip that I had to go on, and you traveled with me. And we saw Dodgeball
Sure.
on that trip, and we were one of the few people, and we both laughed our
Yeah.
heads off.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the best in movie comedy.
Mm-hmm.
That and Meet the Parents, which I don't watch a lot of comedy movies. Those are the two I remember being in the theater, and I'm loud anyway. I
Yeah.
was laughing super loud.
When I was probably in high school, I think that's probably when this movie came out. Me and my buddies watched this movie and laughed probably harder than any movie. Was Raising Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
I
That's
used to
that
lo-
one.
I used to love
I
that
could
movie.
quote the thing when I was a
haven't
kid.
watched it in a long,
And
long
we watched
time.
it over and over because there was a lot of just deadpan
That's right.
kind of humor in there, just these one-liners that they would say, and we go around saying them all the time, and I just remember quoting that movie constantly.
So it's hard for me to say what would probably be the funniest. Honestly, the ones I probably go to the most are the 21 and 22 Jump Street movies with Channing Tatum and Jonah. I think
Also
those are
laughed a lot at
hilarious.
those movies
But
too.
I think the one that stands the most test to me, just in how prescient it was, is a super filthy movie, but Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
I haven't seen that yet.
Okay, it's a
haven't
it's a
seen it?
parody
No, I
of.
haven't.
It probably has not aged well at all either. But anytime I watch, like I just watched the Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen movie, I cannot watch one of those and not. I can't enjoy them because they all follow the exact formula that movie has, where it starts at the greatest moment of their thing, and they're trying to find Dewey Cox, and he's sitting up against
flashes
the wall.
back to their-
And he goes, son. Dewey Cox has to think about his entire life before he plays a rock and roll show. And then it flashes back to him being a kid, which is how all those movies start, right? The Bohemian Rhapsody starts at Band-Aid and it's like a whole, anyway.
That's true.
But all those, I watched the Rocket Man one, which I actually kind of liked the Rocket Man.
I thought
one. It
Rocket
was-
Man was better than Bohemian Rhapsody, which I know one particular member of our family would not be happy
really
about.
liked
But
it.
she's not watching the podcast.
That's
so
right.
it's not-
But I thought the Elton John, because it was more like a musical and was a little more, it didn't fit in the thing. But anyway, that wasn't the question. But one of those was probably the things I laugh at the most.
All right, now we'll end on a serious question.
Oh boy.
Okay, so if you could change one thing that is happening in our world, what would you change?
I don't know. Our answers are probably going to be very similar.
Yeah.
I think certainly all the racial injustice that's going on in our world and all the brokenness that's going on. I mean, and my hope is in the kingdom of God that's going to do that and going to bring justice to those that are hurting, bring comfort to those that are hurting, and to build a world where those things don't happen.
I would say the same thing, but this was sort of a tangential issue that I think gets to the heart of a lot of issues like that. And I was just having this conversation with someone just this week. I wish we could talk to each other And what I mean by that is I feel like right now in our world, there are a lot of people that have good intentions. I think most people, not all, but most people come at whatever their opinion is about whatever issue it is that's out there in our world. They really do have a desire to make things better and to fix the wrongs.
Sure.
I do believe that most people have that as their core. And so there's two people that want what's best for people. They've come at it from two different angles, and yet they can't ever seem to get to that point where we are fighting for the same things. We can't seem to talk to each other in a way that ever moves the ball forward. It's like I sense that we all seem to enjoy talking past each other, and it's almost the thing of if I get my opinion out on you and I can one-up you and make you look bad, make you look wrong, then I've somehow accomplished something, but we haven't. Because we all know that nothing gets accomplished in our world, and back to your question, nothing changes in our world until we actually start to communicate about the thing and try to figure out what we have in common and how we can move forward. And that's sad to me. And it makes me not, and this is partially my fault, it makes me not even want to engage sometimes with people, because I feel like, what good is it going to do? No matter who's right, who's wrong, it just doesn't seem to ever change. And I wish that were different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's good answers, both of them, really good answers. I wouldn't have much different than either one of those. Those are definitely, mine is all, I love the church. I've always loved the church. The church has consumed my life and my passion. I believe it is still the hope of the world, but I hope that the church can give up some really treasured things for the sake of moving toward what Jesus would have the church do. And I really believe that there's a chance with everything that's happening in our world that followers of Jesus are going to step to the forefront. And by that I mean not church people and not people that claim the name Christian, but people who really are following Jesus and are going to step forward, and we're going to move toward what he would have do, because he's definitely walking one direction. And what is in heaven is going to be on the earth.
Yep.
I mean, that is true. And we should be praying for it, and I should be asking myself all the time, am I working toward what is going on in heaven? Because that's my call as a follower of Christ, is to try to be bringing heaven to earth, not trying to get more people to heaven.
And becoming the kind of person that would enjoy it when it's here.
Yeah.
As, to get back to your other,
once it happens, I'm going to enjoy it.
Because I think there's a huge possibility for many of us that call ourselves Christians and are involved in that thing. And because going back to the heaven thing, the goal is not all of us go up there, but that heaven's coming down here. There's a new heaven.
Heaven
and a
is
new
definitely
earth.
coming down here.
And so this idea of when it finally comes down here, I may go, oh.
Well, back to what you said earlier. If we don't learn how to love and be with people that look, think, and act differently than we do, heaven's going to be really tough.
Yeah. It's one of the sad things when anytime somebody says, Christians in America supported this political thing, what I know they mean white Christians. And what I have learned in the last bit of being open to pray for anybody is that most people who are open to be prayed for, they ain't white. They don't. They may not even speak English, and I often have to use a translation to pray with them. But there are a lot of people that are very, very interested in God, and who didn't vote the way that everybody thinks Christians voted.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever that means. And that the majority of Christians on this planet do not live in the United States.
Yes.
The vast majority of Christians on this planet don't look like us.
Are not white evangelical Christians.
And they do not care about our political issues.
They do not.
They aren't consuming any time with it. And the kingdom of God is coming in places that gave up on political issues a long time ago.
Yes. Reminds me of that documentary you and I both love on YouTube that's showing the church in Iran right now and
where-
how it's exploding.
Where our Christians in this country would have us believe it's being overrun by Muslims, and the truth is,
Yes.
mosques are being emptied by the kingdom of God.
Absolutely.
Because people stopped giving, they gave up on political stuff a long time ago.
Yep.
Yep.
And they see the value of the kingdom coming to bear in this world.
Sure.
You know, it's where finally they realize that goal is not getting us there anymore.
Yep.
It never was.
What's
We
that
just-
thing of weakness we were talking about? Once you don't have any power, and in those political arenas, they told people a long time ago,
Yeah.
we don't care what you think. But still in this country, because we think, I got a right to have my say, we haven't submitted what I should be saying to the power of God. I just say whatever I want to say.
Yeah.
And say what everybody who was around me said, and said what my parents said, and said what everybody I think looks like me says, instead of saying what I think Jesus would say.
Yeah.
But when you don't have a right to say anything, you go, well, if I'm going to change things here, I better get about something that can really change it, which turns out to be God.
Yes. All right.
All right, that's good enough.
Well, we could keep going on that for a
Yeah.
long time, but we won't. So hope it was worth your time. Glad y'all were here today.
Thank you guys for joining in.
See you next time.
See ya.